Welcome to Born for the Trades, a home service podcast, and I'm your host, Mandeep Bala. Today, unfortunately, Shreya could not join because we are at the event. She is busy there. And today we have amazing guest, Patrick Lange from Business Modification Group. Welcome to our show, Patrick.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been wanting to be with you for a long time. We've discussed this, so it's great to finally have the time to sit down and do it together.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you had to wait a lot. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Join us as we dive deep into the world of home service entrepreneurship, interacting with industry leaders, coaches, and entrepreneurs about their experiences, challenges, and victories. Through their inspiring stories, we hope to equip our listeners with the tools and knowledge they need to succeed in the competitive home service industry. So whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out, tune in to Born for the Trades podcast for invaluable insight and real-world inspiration.
All right. Before that, I want to actually thank our sponsor, Elite Call. And for the listeners, if you are not using Outbound, you got to check out Elite Call. Jack, my good friend, and they're doing amazing job for home service contractors by outbounding calls. Like, if you have database, you can reach out to them, and they have amazing closing rate. I know you can train your CSRs to do the outbound job, but you got to rely on professionals. And Jack, Pinsel, Tim Pinsel, like at Elite Call, they are doing phenomenal job with amazing closing rates. So thank you, Elite Call, and contractors. If you have not used them, reach out to Jack or Tim at Elite Call. They'll definitely help you with your outbound calls. All right. Before we get into more details, I think for the listeners, Patrick, we want to know more about you. Like, how did you get into home service industry? And I know you're helping a lot of contractors in valuing their overall valuation and selling. But let's start with your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been a broker for a number of years, probably 15 years, and sold everything: bars, restaurants, gas stations, you name it. I sold it. And a little over 8 years ago, I had a heating and air company listed for sale, and I bought it.
Oh, wow.
And so I bought it business, ran it for 2 years, realized I didn't belong running a heating and air company, and I went to go sell it. And when I did, it was a small company. I couldn't find really any information about it. And so I thought, as a broker, if I can't find information about it, what's a contractor to do?
Right.
So I thought there might be an opportunity. So at that time, I kind of shifted my practice to seeing if I could just sell heating and air.
Mm-hmm.
I'm based in Florida. The first few were in Florida, and then I got a listing in Georgia and then South Carolina. And I've been fortunate. The next 6 years, it's kind of exploded. We've sold a little over 120 heating and air companies in the last 6 years.
Wow.
And been able to help a lot of people and learn a lot in the business as a side benefit.
That's amazing. And I think let's start with the initial process of selling. I think before selling, you got to value that company, right? So let's say if any HVAC company, they reach out and they want to sell their company. So what's the first process you follow? What's involved in overall process?
Absolutely. Great question. And that's really the best first step, is that valuation.
Yeah.
Most people don't know who to ask.
Right.
So they don't want to ask one of their competitors. They don't want to ask. Oftentimes they ask the person who says they want to buy them, which is certainly not the person I would be asking what my business is worth. And so the first thing we do is value. And I do that for people who want to sell now, or they want to sell 5 years from now, because the reality is, if you don't know what it's worth,
Right.
you don't know how to get to where you want it to be, what it's worth. And so valuation is the very first part in that process.
Okay, that's awesome. And I think with the service companies, right, I just want to ask you, with the service companies versus tech companies, which is product, right, that has more weightage on what kind of X you're going to get. I'm sure on the tech side, it's more. When it comes to service, I want to understand how the overall valuation gets calculated, because when it comes to, let's say, EBITDA, right?
Mhm.
That's you call it, right? Is that something, net profit, EBITDA, you look at, and how you multiply, how you come up with that number? If it's $1 million company, but maybe the profit is $100,000, right? If it's $50 million company and maybe they have amazing net profit, right? Just want to understand how multiples work.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a combination of things. At the end of the day, it's going to be a multiple of the net income, EBITDA, seller discretionary earnings, depending on who the buyer is, how it's structured. but there's a lot of other things that go into that. So what's your online reputation? If we look you up, what's it going to say about you? What are your customers saying about
Right.
you? What kind of systems do you have in place? Are you the best tech? Are you also the best salesman? Are you also the bookkeeper? Or do you have systems and people in place? What are your gross sales? Because a buyer is going to look at, if you're doing $1 million versus $10 million, there's more opportunities for them to make money inside of there. So size, breakdown of business, how much new construction, or is it service, repair, and replacement? Do you have maintenance agreements in place? So that multiple is going to be within a range. Depending on the size of the business, it may be 2 times to 4 times, or if a bigger company, it may be 4 to 8 times. So it's going to be within that range. And then those other things, maintenance agreements, service, work, online reviews, reputation, all those things are going to determine where in that range you are. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense, and I think now I understand that. And what about like culture? I'm a big on like culture, right? So is there any parameter where you actually look at the culture as well that company has built?
Absolutely. One of the first questions a buyer, an educated buyer, is going to ask is, tell me about your employees. How long have they been there?
Right.
Are there relationships there? What do you do to keep them happy and keep them satisfied? Mandeep, as you know, one of the biggest problems facing the industry is getting qualified talent.
Yes.
And so many of these buyers are buying companies often for the talent. And so if there's not long-term relationships there, if it's a constant hire and fire and hire and fire and hire and quit, that's going to make them nervous, and it's going to have an impact on the value of the business.
Oh yeah, I think that's a good point that you have mentioned. And generally, like I think a lot of emotions are attached as a business owner. A lot of emotions are attached. Like they don't want to like sell it, right? Uh, but yes, there are some other owners out there that I have met at this event. They have the exit plan ready, right? They are practical. Okay, once the company reaches to 10 million, 15 million, they want to cash out. Uh, what are the challenges that you see, especially with like the companies those are doing maybe 2 million and they want to sell it, and you might see that nothing is organized, right? How what are the challenges and how long it takes to basically find a buyer?
Great question as well. Couple things. And so one, the money side of the transaction is the easiest side. It either makes mathematical sense or it doesn't. You've got a price in mind and we can sell it for that figure. So it's the emotional stuff that comes with it, right?
Right.
And you mentioned that. That's the hard part of the deal. Are you really ready to walk away? What are you going to do when you're done? What about your employees? What about your family? What about your customers? So there's all this stuff that goes into that. Knowing that valuation and knowing that figure ahead of time takes that out of the equation. So here's what the dollar needs to be. The offer's that dollar. Great. Checks that box. Let's focus on everything else.
Right.
Smaller companies are harder to sell. And the reality is, because no buyer calls me and says, hey, I want to buy a business that I work 15 hours in the field and then I go home and do books at night. Nobody wants to work that hard.
Right.
So that makes those smaller companies harder to sell. And pricing has an impact on how long it takes. So think of your house. If your house is worth $200,000 and you price it at $500,000,
Yeah.
it's going to take a long time to sell. If your house is worth $200,000 and you price it at $250,000, chances are you're gonna get more activity. And it's the same thing with a business.
Got it. Got it. And, I've been, a lot of companies, a lot of big names, they have reached out to me. So if I'm ready to sell it, like,
Sure.
the thing is that, like, I don't have exit plan, maybe in future, but I have like a lot of emotions attached. Like I said, right, as business owner, you have, and the work culture that I have built, uh, and I don't want to lose that. So I'm always afraid. And I've seen that, and I've heard like a lot of PE companies, right? When you sell it to them, so their management comes into play, right? They want to see what exactly you're doing, like your books, your work culture, your management, leadership, entire thing. So have you seen, like, you might have done like a lot of deals, right? Have you ever seen that any company that you help in selling that business, and after that, the work culture has completely changed? A lot of old employees, they have quit their jobs.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it does happen from time to time. So what we typically do, or we're different. A lot of brokers try to keep buyer and seller kind of separate. I like getting buyers and sellers together right away. Let's see if it's a good fit. Let's
Right.
see if, you know, everybody on a first phone call, everybody's nice and everybody's friendly, but then through that process, by meeting in person and doing things, you can decide, is it really a good fit? The beauty of the market being so strong right now, and I often say, you don't have to sell to a jerk. So if you meet with them and it's not a good fit, don't sell it to them. So you could try to prevent that from happening. Now, does it work every time? No. Some things are going to change, and the reality is, the company's always going to be different. When you're no longer there, it's going to be somebody different making different decisions, but you want to try to do the best you can for your customers and for your employees.
Yeah, makes sense. And I think it totally makes sense that whenever you are ready, right, to sell it, like if you're not gonna be there, like you want to make sure that your business is in a good hands,
Right.
right? And I want to ask you, like nowadays, a lot of like companies, especially home service contractors, they are planning their exit plan, and when to start. Let's say if someone is not, they are not ready to sell their company, and when they should start thinking about like coming up with an exit plan.
Immediately. Yesterday is really the answer.
Yesterday?
Yeah, absolutely. Because here's the reality. Most people are building a business to save money on taxes. Self-employed, doing everything they can to minimize taxes, and they're not showing profit. They're not doing these things. They have no idea what their business is worth or what it can be worth down the road. So doing the valuation now, so you know where it is, and developing a plan so when it's there, because unfortunately things happen in life.
Right.
People get sick, people get divorced, all sorts of things can happen.
Right.
And if you've been building this business to save taxes and doesn't show any money, you go to market and you've got nothing to sell. And unfortunately, I've sat at way too many kitchen tables with husband and wife, and I have to be the bad guy. I have to say, hey, you've spent the last 20 years building something that nobody's going to want to buy, and it's a horrible conversation to have.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. So that means like, those who are listening to our podcast, you got to start, thinking, planning for your exit plan right away.
Absolutely. And it makes it easier.
Right.
So you know what your business is worth. And then when it's time to sell, you're not trying to play catch up or fix a bunch of things. You're ready to go. You know what the check needs to say, and it's a much smoother process.
Got it. So if somebody is, let's say, they reach out to you and strategize, like, their exit plan, they want to sell their business. So do you work with like, PE companies or direct with the other business owners, like, big companies, they want to sell smaller companies, or you work with both?
So I work with both, but primarily I work with the business owner, the seller, because they're the one typically that needs the help. The private equity group doesn't need help on valuation.
Yeah.
They don't need help on negotiating. Most of my clients, selling their business is the biggest sale of their life, and most of them have never sold a business. So those are the ones that I think really need my help. And there's all these professional buyers out there that they're not situated and ready to discuss and meet with. And so typically I work with them and help them put a game plan in place to make it happen.
Makes sense. And Patrick, like if you want to share 2, 3, like, advice for home service industry owners to take it now, what it would be?
Yeah, first thing is keep clean books and records, right? So many people treat their business like it's their personal checking account. And then when it's time to sell, it doesn't show any profit. And so having that together is going to be beneficial when the time comes for them to sell. Second thing would be is getting themselves out of the van, putting people and systems in place and growing the business so that they have something bigger to sell.
Yeah.
And the third thing would focus on service and repair. I'd stay away from new construction only because buyers are not looking for new construction companies typically. And so a business built on service, repair, and relationships is what brings the highest value.
That's amazing. And I think first thing you said, knowing your numbers, right? That's for sure. And second thing you mentioned about
getting themselves out of the van, getting people and systems in place.
Right. And third is like focusing on repair and other service.
Right.
That including like, selling maintenance programs as well?
Yeah, absolutely. That would fall in the third part. I'm a big believer in maintenance programs. Buyers love maintenance programs. It makes the customer stickier because they're paying for their own loyalty. It typically helps develop a better relationship with the clients because you're in the client's home more often. There's and they're paying for their own loyalty. There's a lot of opportunity there.
Awesome. And I would like to ask you, like, I'm sure a lot of our listeners are listening to this podcast and watching as well. What's the best place to reach out to you to have this conversation get started?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of places. So my website, businessmodificationgroup.com, on that front page, we've got a valuation you can fill out and get a valuation of your business right there. If you want a more in-depth valuation, my phone number's on there. They can call me at any point in time. I'm extremely active on LinkedIn, Facebook. I've got a YouTube channel. They look up Patrick Lange at Business Modification Group on YouTube. I probably have 70 or 80 videos talking about buying and selling in the heating and air space. So reach out anytime they want to. I'm happy to help.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And for the listeners, we're going to link everything in the podcast description. And again, thank you so much for listening to our podcast. And thanks for all the support and love. And thank you to Elite Call, and especially like to the home service industry owners. Like if you are looking for outbound service, reach out to Elite Call. And if you need any help related to sales coach, reach out to Shreya or Joe, Uncle Joe at Service MVP. And if you need any marketing help, it starts with audit, strategy, creating your digital marketing roadmap. I'm there. My team is there at Grow Nearby to help you. Thank you so much for listening to us, and we will see you on the next one. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah.